Back to the Bitcoin Reformation Podcast, where we are three Lutheran pastors who both love Jesus and, yes, Bitcoin too. We're still in the summer of two, I think is what we're going to call it, where there are only two of us because one of us is gallivanting all over the place. And so Ben is away this time, out doing some good donor stuff for PLI, for the organization that he serves. And so it is just David and I. And today we are very excited. We're going to do a follow-up episode to our previous episode with Trevor Sutton. So we'll make sure to link that below if you missed that, to go back and watch that. Because in that episode, he gave to us 3 questions that he thought every Christian, and we might even add every person, should use or think about when they engage with the technology. And so today we're going to look at it through that lens of how does Bitcoin answer all 3 of these questions? How do we think it does anyway? And we think that we have some really compelling things to share with you. But before we get there, let's do our regular sort of go around check-in. So David, how are things in your family? What's going on in your world there?
Things are good. Boy, I've got older kids, so and Megan and I are learning for the first time how to parent older children. By older, I'm thinking of the 21-year-old and the 19-year-old. So 2 college kids, one headed into his last year of school. The high school ones, we have some practice at that. The kids are unique, but yeah, so we're feeling kind of feeble, quite frankly, right now in the parenting department, with fear and trembling, probably like having a newborn at home and maybe all the same. But really, that said, we're all doing quite well. We've had some travels this summer, visiting family, 4 of us. Megan and I and the 2 youngers went camping in a beautiful part of California a week and a half ago. Got to go splash in the Colorado River at a friend's place last week. And it was almost cold there. It was only like 105 and not the normal 120. But the
That's
Colorado is just
crazy.
absolutely beautiful in that scorching heat. You kind of pop in and out. And then we have one weekend away coming up, just the 6 of us, where we can really, before kids start heading off to school in Irvine and Phoenix, we can do some things together, shoulder to shoulder, but also look each other in the face over some meals. So we're looking forward to that. That's sort of the pulse on how we are. Oh, our oldest had last week, whenever that was, had his wisdom teeth pulled, and it did not disappoint in the whole right after when we scooped him up, put him in the car to bring him home. He rolled down his window and was waving goodbye to the nurses who had brought him up in the wheelchair. He was really kind of weepy, upset that he didn't get a chance to say goodbye to the doctor. And we're like, no, that's probably good news. By the time you woke up, everything was good and he was gone. And something about I ate a mushroom, not a mushroom, a marshmallow last night, but really it was a pillow. And then he'd just start giggling and then cry. So that's the Ruffner scoop right now.
That's awesome. That's like that's what the whole experience is about, right? Basically, just to get to see that post
Yes,
surgery bliss, right?
yes, yes.
Oh man, that's awesome. I feel
And
like
how about
we
your
could
house, the
we
Jared
could have some
household?
fun off the camera conversations about the differences in parenting a 4-year-old and a 20-year-old young adult, and all the similarities, I'm sure, in some ways that maybe we don't even necessarily quite think about, because
Probably.
people are people and kids are kids, whether they're 4
Yeah.
or 30, right? I guess I'm still a kid in my parents' eyes, probably, even though I'm a grown adult. Anyway, so we are just trying to survive, I think is the best way to say that. Yeah, we're sort of in the normal things, right? Not now. We're filming this the end of July-ish, and Judah is he'll be 2 months in a couple of weeks here, which is just like bonkers. He's getting bigger, all those sort of things. And it still is just amazing that we have 3 kids. I don't know, like it hits me at the weirdest moments when like we're just sitting around the table and it's like, oh, there's like 3 of them. and especially when, one is losing their mind and the other sympathetically starts losing their mind, and then there's just Judah just looking out into the sky, because I know there's a day when he's going to start losing his mind too. But just, I don't know, it's really good. So we did our first conference as a family. And so we were down in California there for two nights. And so I was doing my conference stuff while Emily was with the kids. They did a children's museum, stuff like that. But it was a very challenging thing for us to try and figure out how to live together. So, I mean, Emily said, Jared, you're the only one who's struggling, which is probably true. Should I be with my kids? Should I go be hanging out with the people at the conference? Where's the balance and all of that sort of stuff? But it was very cool too. Zoe's favorite thing at the conference was going in the pool for like an hour.
Of course.
Over the whole entire day. And the best part, David, was she has not been in a pool, I don't know, 6+ months in any sort of water, right? Because it was kind of winter when we left Pennsylvania.
Sure.
And we haven't gone to a pool here yet. So she had a life jacket on, and within 10 minutes of being there, she was jumping into the water and like going head underwater and kicking and swimming. It's like,
amazing.
Where did you learn how to do this? Like, we did not teach you. Is there a Bluey episode that you are watching and you've learned how to like go under the water and swim? Like, it was unreal. Absolutely unreal.
And can I add, I think, to layer on that, and I'm sure you got that, this is your first child. This is not like first child sort of behavior. Typically, they're the more trepidatious one. The second child comes along, and he's the bomber into the pool. That's great.
Oh, yeah. And that is so opposite. Zoe is so much the like go crazy, do all the stuff, run down the trail, run on the side of the rock, even though she's like near the edge. And Silas is like, look at the edge. Daddy, hold me. It's like, okay, bud, come here. I got you. Lots of good fun stuff like that. And we've been out hiking a few times here too. So anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to recap a little bit of this conversation and dive in a new way. So if you didn't watch the episode, I already said go back and watch it, but let me remind you a little bit about the 3 questions that Trevor asked us. And so Trevor does a lot of work in technology, writes about it, reads about it, and we post him, hey, how should a Christian think about this, or how should a follower of Jesus engage with technology? Because technology is all around us, right? It's not just the phones, it's not just the computers, it's also our dishwasher and our washing machine. All of these things are technology and tools that we use for various certain things. And so he posed to us 3 different questions that we're going to take our way through just very linearly here and go back and forth and see how many answers we can come up with for each of these. And then we'll just kind of leave it to you to digest and push back and, leave your feedback for us listeners. So the 3 questions were, what problem does this technology solve? The example he used, this was, well, what problem does getting a 75-inch TV solve in my life? Maybe it's really far back and you gotta get a bigger TV so you can see better, but maybe there is no problem it solves. The second question he asked us was, what affordance does this technology have? I think we could simplify that a little bit and say, what benefit does this technology give me? And so the example he used in the episode was the difference between a Kindle and a physical book. And so a Kindle affords me the benefit of being able to highlight a note, to search those notes, to read in the dark because there's a backlight, to not have to carry around a giant tome of a novel, to have it in a thin little tablet. But a physical book has the affordance of not needing to be charged. I don't need to have to necessarily follow a schedule of it being due if it's my book. And then the third question he asked us to consider was, how does this incline me in a particular way? And frankly, I don't remember exactly the example he gave to us, but this is the whole idea that we talked about too last time, that technology is not neutral, that all technology inclines us and pushes us to desire certain things and act in a certain way. And so to think about more intelligently, to ask the question, hey, if I choose to do this, the example he uses, where is our TV? So where your TV is going to incline you to watch TV at different times, to not watch TV at different times. For example, if it's in your bedroom, you're going to be more inclined to watch your TV at night in your bedroom before you're in bed than if it was either in a living room or in a separate viewing room. So 3 questions: problem, benefit, and inclination, we'll call it. So let's start at the beginning. What problem does this technology of Bitcoin solve? David, what do you think?
Well, I saw this coming that you would queue it up and send it my way. And I think it absolutely does solve at least a problem, if not many related problems. So I have that, but I'm also going to take a step back from that and say I didn't see the problem for the longest time. I just didn't see it. And sort of what the image that comes to mind for that for me is we live here in Big Bear, California, up at 6,700 feet. Almost every day we get to go hiking, and we're up in the hills above us, so we make it above 7,000 feet. But when we do drive down the hill to go to civilization, as we must do, particularly when we drive west, we call that going down the hill, as we did last week with the son who got his wisdom teeth pulled. It can be a beautiful blue sky day up here, just like this. And then there's a variety of days you can go to down the hill. There's certainly the days where you're driving into the full cloud layer. It's socked in. When people are living down there and it's socked in, they know that it's cloud layer. But the one I want to point out, or the one I want to have the listener imagine, is when you drive down into that smog layer. Because we're coming down out of our beautiful air and we can see the filthy air. And I'm told it's way better than it was like in the 70s, 80s, 90s, but nevertheless, it exists on many days. And you drive down into it and we see it and we say, oh, those poor fools who live down the hill. You know, check this out, Jared. Once you're finally down in it and get out of your car and look around, you don't see it. You just
Right?
don't see it. It doesn't register the same way it does on the cloudy day. So the average day down there, where the air quality down there is poor compared to up here, we can see the distinction between the two, particularly when going from the good air to the bad air. But once you're in the bad air, you just can't see it. And that, for me, is a picture of essentially what I grew up in. And I think where I'll pick on us Westerners, American Westerners, where we are. You've got three pastors here on this podcast. You can find other people from this kind of similar angle, being Bitcoin, or other angles, just being pure finance, fiscal and monetary policy, who say, boy, when it comes to the dollar, it's not all green and good. We're having a bad day. We're living in an unhealthy environment. You can hear people say that, and you might say, "Oh, there's old man yelling at the sky again," sort of thing. But Jared, to put it simply, ultimately, then what's the problem? We have a sick monetary unit, the U.S. dollar. And to make matters worse, we're not unique in this. We're not unique. We're not necessarily unique in history. I think we've mentioned before on shows, one could follow through the history of the Roman Empire. And one of the incredible lenses of that history is you could follow through their money and say, what happened to money and how did that correlate with the decline of empire and other things that came in, like decadence. And there's a story to be told. We are repeating it, but we're not the only nation in the world. There are other nations that are doing this right now as well, particularly through the printing of money. And then there's some other nations still that do not print their own money, but they lean on and depend on nations like ours and our dollar for their currency unit. And they're in a unique position to where anything bad that happens to the dollar, there's absolutely no top side to them. Whereas in American life, when we print money, somebody initially gets to use that funny money right up front to their advantage, and then it washes over the whole system. And then the way it washes over the whole system is what we experience as higher prices. We talk about things going up in price when really there's just more dollars around, and so the purchasing power, the ability of those dollars to take a bite out of crime, it just gets weaker and weaker, smaller and smaller. So for me, the problem is that debasement of currency, Jared. Now, I'm going to say one more thing alongside that. and it's a much more human thing. You could say the debasement of currency, and it sounds like just a thing, an activity. There's not necessarily somebody's hand on the lever, pulling the lever, making that happen. But really, the weakness here isn't a debased dollar. The weakness here that Bitcoin begins to address, and I think addresses substantially, is fallen human creatures. And here's what I mean by that. I do want to think at least this, that there's still people who for good reasons say, I want to be a public servant and I want to go serve the public. And then they get in offices like that, and certainly a variety of things happen. Some of them fall into gross temptation and do gross things, right? That's true. But when it comes to this fiscal and monetary policy, an emergency pops up and they say something like this, you know what? Just this one time, let's pull that lever. We can do it. And by the way, you can trust us to never do it again because I can even trust us to never do it again. But that's just not how human frailty works. Once we've exercised, I'll just call this exercise the sin once, we've worn a groove there, and we're gonna, eventually go back to that groove, go back to that familiar thing. And so, what's the problem? The problem is that fiat currency looks to some individual or some group of people who is saying this, Jared, you ready? Just trust me. Just trust us, right? And if I found out anything about myself and others in my 47 years of life, is that, yeah, on some days and many days, God bless it, we trust people and can trust them. But I have let other people down, and many other people have let me down. And so to have a monetary system that that whose foundation is just trust us is pretty flimsy to begin with, and it's going to fall just as we are here. What do you think, Jared? That's my problem. That's my framing of the problem.
Well, I think the image you started with is great. Like hey, I didn't even realize there was a problem.
Right.
And we talked about that, right? We didn't even, none of us got into this because we actually thought there was a problem. So maybe this whole question as a means of like trying to get people into this is somewhat irrelevant or unhelpful, because you can't, even if we try and pitch it to you, unless you truly either believe it or see it, it's one of those, well, okay, whatever, doesn't really affect me, don't have that urgency for change, right? And so it's hey, well, that's fine, it's like anybody who goes to the doctor, hey, you need to eat better, exercise. Well, okay, let me have a heart attack first, and then I'll get serious about it. It's we don't take ourselves seriously in those problems seriously. So I like that first. And then I think the idea of, I'm trying to summarize. So I think monetary debasement, I think, is one of the problems you hear it solving. So this is right, the idea that silent theft is how some people call it, that they are stealing your purchasing power without telling you. Or maybe they are in some weird way, but that's not how they don't say, hey, we're stealing your purchasing power by 2% every year or 3%. I also hear the idea of centralization, right? So the currency should not be controlled. It solves the centralization of currency and control over the flows of that currency. And I would say that in large part, the problem Bitcoin solves is the problem of money in general. Right. So it is a better money than our current system that we live in. Now, of course, we could probably have a whole episode on what is money, and we probably should someday, but generally speaking, we usually think about money as a few things. These are just some of them, so help me if I miss one. But usually we talk about it from the sense of needing to be divisible, right? So my money is no good if I can't take part of it and buy something with it. I can't take a whole gold bar and buy my groceries. I'm going to be grossly overpaying for my, groceries, right, unless I buy the whole entire Costco store.
Or but somebody would say you can chip off a flake of that, and that's true. I like the example, and I'm trying to just ride along with you.
Sure,
and I
go
don't
ahead.
mean to disrail you, but I like
You're
the
good.
example of a cow. A cow makes particularly bad money.
Yeah, there you go.
It's either, a full cow right now, or it's steaks, and I've got to invite the neighborhood, particularly through most of human history without refrigeration. because once it's butchered, we got to eat it now. So a cow makes bad money, right? Even though a cow is
Right.
worth a lot, it makes bad money.
Perfect. And even like the liquidity of that, right? So like how easy is it to kill your cow? And if you were going to divide it up, how much time is it going to take for you to divide it up and then to distribute it all to all those people? It's much easier. The dollar is great. I got my $10, my $20, my $1 bill that I can really easily give to somebody, all those sort of things. So divisible is another one. Another thing that money needs to be is it actually needs to be spendable. So it needs to be accepted, right? So my money is no good necessarily if it can't actually be spent somewhere, that it's not desired. And so it doesn't matter if I think my pen is a great form of money if no one is willing to actually accept this pen as a form of currency. Same with cows, same with whatever you want to use there. Also needs to be a store of value. This is where I think the Bitcoin solves the biggest problem because we don't necessarily think about our money as storing value. In today's world, we think if I need to store value, I need to get it out of the dollar, right? I can't just put money in my bed and pray that in 10 years when I need it, it's going to be able to buy as much, because the dollar does not store value well. And, you hear people all the time here, well, the dollar has lost 99% of its value over time. And in some ways, it's one of those arguments that isn't necessarily helpful. It's right, but it's not necessarily helpful, because I don't know too many people that are actually storing just dollars anywhere. But it proves the point largely that we've accepted the fact that our dollar is a poor store of value. That even to say, well, yeah, no one stores their dollars in their bed. And the point is, well, if it was a good money, you could. And you would actually be able to maintain your time, your energy, your purchasing power over time if it was a good money. So we got divisibility, has to be able to be spent. There's a fancy word that I'm forgetting for that. Store of value. And then what is there another one? Or is that it?
Is fungible is one where, any $1 can be swapped out for another. There's nothing
Okay.
special about this $1 over and above another dollar, right? Whereas if paintings were money, you'd say, I want that Picasso painting and not that Ruffner painting. They're not fungible. They're not interchangeable because you don't want to see me paint anything. So that's one of them. But yeah, you've covered a lot. I actually
Okay.
think that the store of value is huge, because what I was going to say, that is the problem that ultimately got me going on this journey, Jared,
Yeah.
was I'm suddenly 40. Finally, we've put student loans to bed. We had some little 401ks and a pastor's pension 16 years in. And I realized I kind of blithely for many years been saying I'm a pastor. I'll never retire. I'll always be a pastor in one way or another with a church. If not for anything else, then maybe something like healthcare. I'll be part-time to get healthcare, and that still might be the case, admittedly. But finally, having put student loans to bed, and a few other things happening, I just looked around. I was like, holy cow, I'm 40 and I've not really done anything more to save for retirement. I got to thinking about my wife, caring for her, or should something happen to me, the kids. And that's precisely what got me going on this road was I realized, I could sock dollars away, but two things. There was no interest rates anymore, and prices suddenly were going up in COVID time. And that was like the old ice water bucket challenge. It was hitting me all at once and it was taking my breath away. And I said to myself, what is going on here? I don't know. Suddenly, this thing that was supposed to be the path towards strength felt like a very weak proposal to me, Jared. So that's how I would describe the problem for me. That was my entree, my entry point into all this.
And I think the fact that in some ways it feels like we're circling around a lot of different things in some way helps propose or put before you that there's a lot of problems that Bitcoin solves. That we've talked on here before about the phrase Bitcoin fixes this. And so we haven't talked at all about a whole bunch of other problems that Bitcoin fixes, right? We talk about incentivizing clean energy. We
Right.
could talk about debanking and, permissionless money. We could resistance money, as the book is titled. I mean, there are so many different things. And so I think that's like one of those, here is just trying to pick one that we think maybe is applicable to the most people. But I also think it goes to show how many problems it could solve. And even that maybe there's some problems it solves that we don't even know it solves yet. And we don't want to necessarily adopt technology on future promises, but nevertheless, the fact that there are so many things, if we're using this as a dipstick, we could say, hey, maybe you should actually tell me what is your problems that you're facing financially today. And then I can tell you, how does Bitcoin fix this? And so if it's storing value, if it's having money to be able to be spent, if it's having a currency that someone else isn't controlling, then we can talk to you about those things. But Bitcoin fixes so many different problems.
I think one. Oh, go ahead, Jared. I thought you were at an end there.
I was going to ask anything else before we go to the next one.
Yeah, I think we've all had some civics lessons. We maybe had them in junior high and high school, maybe took them to heart, maybe forgot them. And I'm describing myself, by the way. I'm sure I had wonderful teachers who gave me wonderful content. I could pass tests pretty well and get by on the homework. And as a result, I did not digest as much as I should have. But, in my adult life, you start to say, wow, I live in the United States of America. If there is a genius to this place, what is the genius? And it's not perfect, but the U.S. Constitution, right? The U.S. Constitution is pretty amazing. In fact, I would say, sort of like Satoshi and Bitcoin and the white paper. The more I've heard about it through the years, and the more I understand it, it's sort of a grab bag of what the Western world had learned over the ages. There were accomplishments along the way. These founding fathers of ours stood on the shoulders of giants before them, right? But they also added some unique twists that, when brought all together, is sort of genius. But at the heart of that genius nature of the Constitution is, and here's a phrase that I think is known to many, the separation of powers. Let's not put all of this in one person's hand. On a good day, they can lead us, but on a bad day, they can be a special kind of devil, right? So let's separate out the executive branch, the legislative and the judicial. Now, where those have morphed today is a whole other story. And again, it's not perfect, but why separate these things out? Well, the founding fathers knew this. They knew of the wickedness of the human heart, or as David Brooks said once in one of his books, that we're all sort of we're twisted, and instead of crucifying each other for that, they acknowledged that, and so they did a separation and a check of powers. We often grumble at our government how inefficient it is, and then you're like, actually, this is by design. The inefficiency is by design. When we make mistakes, at least we make them slowly, or that's the hope, at least, right? And that comes from not just looking at other people out there on a bad day, but that comes from looking in the mirror. So the genius of American life, at least I'd like to proffer this, and I think others would hop on board, is the Constitution, which has this separation of powers so that no one can be a special kind of devil in his own right. And in the separation of the powers, it keeps the government from getting too big. The government does the things it's supposed to do, and other people are off to the side, prospering by hard work in serving their neighbors, right? For all of that, though, now look at our currency. Our currency is much more like it's run by some kings. It's run by a secret cabal of people. It's our currency. Back to it is falls underneath not the rubric of separation of powers, because no one is to be trusted with ultimate power, such a lever. Our currency runs very much in the line of, you don't like it, tough. That's on the worst day. And on the best day, just trust me. Just trust us. And when you live in a fallen world with other fallen people like yourselves, I don't know that the mantra of just trust me, just trust us is really where you need to be. It's gonna be abused. It's going to lead to abuse. So I just offer that as well in terms of the problem. Is it the way we run currency does not fit the genius of the American experiment.
Sure. And I think I would summarize that all of this, right, is that it's not the antidote to most of this is hope, right? So that in some ways, what does Bitcoin solve? The lack of hope in the financial world that we live in,
Yeah.
and
Right.
the desperation, right? And so Michael Saylor famously has hope.com, right? You go to hope.com and it talks all about Bitcoin and there's a whole bunch of videos you can watch there and all of these sort of things. So the problem of lack of hope, lack of a future, if you will, even, I think is a good way to summarize that. So let's get into the second question here. What affordance does this technology have? And so what benefit does this technology give to me? What does it offer to me that I might be incentivized or desire to use it? And so in his example, the Kindle allows me to read while I'm feeding Judah at night, right? There's a backlight on it and it's less distractions than my phone maybe. And so when I think about Bitcoin, I'll go first on this one, David.
Yeah, please.
When I think about what affordances does Bitcoin help me or give to me, I think the primary one is a way to store my time, effort, and energy in a way that I do not need to become obsessed, become a investor, right? I don't need to figure out how to game a system. I can just live in this world, and over time it will preserve my time, effort, and energy for myself, for my family, for my children, and even my grandchildren maybe someday too. And so there's real tangible, that's a fact. And we've talked a lot on here too that, in some ways, what are you doing, Pastor, recommending investments? No, this is not investment advice, all those sort of things. But it's a horizontal thing, right? This is not a salvation. Bitcoin is not my salvation. Only Jesus Christ and Him alone is that. But the world that we live in really matters. And if you've ever been someone who doesn't have hope, who doesn't have a means or this light at any sort of end of their tunnel, especially when they think about, David, how you were, right? Thinking about retirement, think about your kids and your grandkids. It's a pretty bleak place to be. It's not that we love money. It's that the world we live in operates on it and with it. And it's what you kind of have to do stuff. And so for me, when I think about what does this afford me, what benefit does it help me? Well, it helps me have and use something that then I don't have to think about it as much. I don't have to obsess over it. And I feel free, if you will, even in that it is a little gospel, a little good news for me in my life. And not just for me, for anybody, right? So when I think about what benefit does it give, personally, it gives me that, but it's also a benefit to everyone. And so it's not just a person. We've talked here too a bunch about nonprofits, right? Because if that is true for me as an individual, financial hope, how many churches are struggling to meet their budget, to have enough money to pay their staff and their really expensive pastors? And well, okay, let's imagine a world where we saved a little bit of our cash reserves in Bitcoin. What would that look like over the course of 5 years? Or if we had an emergency fund, how might that help us? Or, hey, even if we did a capital campaign, if we just stuck a certain percentage into this to then say, hey, in 5 years, this will be unlocked and we can use it for ministry. Suddenly, it is a thing that is going to afford us more mission, more opportunity, more growth as an organization too. And so all of these things, right, are not about a number. It's not, I just can't wait to get $1 million, then I'll feel happy. No, It's about the things that I'll then be able to do with that a ministry, a nonprofit will be able to use that for. That is what matters. That is the benefit it's going to give to me and to my family. So that's how I would answer that first. I'm curious, first, any questions on that? Or if you want to just go off on your own, go right ahead.
No, I just want to piggyback. I loved what you just did. I do think this, and so I'll ask you this before I launch further. I think you just did the benefit, which is the ability to store, and then you couldn't help yourself, Jared. You then started immediately going into how does this then incline me to act, right?
Oh, yeah.
As a
They're all
person of
connected.
hope. They are
Right.
all connected, and those last two, once you feel the benefit, and it starts sending you off in a ways with an inclination to act, you can't help but to go there. So good, you don't disagree with that because I heard you doing
No.
both, and I think they pair wonderfully together. And I mentioned that because I was looking at it, I thought, boy, if Jared calls on me, it's going to be hard for me to just stick with the one, just the affordance, the benefit one, and
Mm-hmm.
not just also the inclination to act. 100%. That was my problem. Couldn't save. Suddenly we're saving. We're saving in a meaningful way. We're saving in a way where what we saved not only keeps up with inflation, right? So isn't the quote unquote melting ice cube, or as you talked about a church with emergency funds, I thought that's like a plate that you spin, right? But in a
Mm-hmm.
world where inflation is happening, you need to keep going back to that plate and keep adding energy to it, which is adding
Right.
dollars in it to keep up with higher expenses and a dollar that's losing purchasing power. We found this thing to put the dollars into, and seems to defy the law of physics. It's a plate that's gotten bigger and spun faster all on its own. It it has done this. So it has been a great way to not only keep up with inflation, but outpace it. And you're exactly right. Suddenly, hope would be my word as well. I've said this to folks. Boy, they say you're into Bitcoin, huh? And you're one of those. And I'll say this. Hey, have you noticed though, we live in a world where institutions are crumbling and being questioned. There's very little trust in institutions. And if there's anything fun to do in this world, on both sides of the aisle, really, people who are wringing their hands and their hearts over things happening around them, if there's anything fun to do, it's to find one of these struggling institutions and tear it down further. I mean, that is cynical, that is nihilistic. It is the
Right.
bent of every grumbling human heart, including my own. And so I say to him, yeah, I am into Bitcoin and I really enjoy the community. Let me tell you why I enjoy this community. This is the one community I know that is hopeful. I'm sorry, the one community outside of the Church of Jesus Christ. And you want to talk about a big capital H hope. That is it. This is a smaller hope. It is lowercase hope. It is horizontal hope, for today and tomorrow, daily bread. Hardly compares with the bread from heaven that I might eat of it and live eternally, being Jesus Christ, bread for me and you and the whole world. But it is a day-to-day horizontal hope. So outside of that Church of Jesus, which should know hope beyond all others, in a community then of mixed day-to-day people and neighbors, this is the most hopeful community that I know of, who are putting energies not into tearing things down, but to build, literally building towards a better day. And that thrills me. You were talking about all of it, and I thought immediately I had to run an errand this morning, and I listened to Coin Stories podcast. This is a podcast by Natalie Brunell. Highly recommend her. Really professional, wonderful woman in the Bitcoin space. And she interviewed a recent USC grad. Her name's Halston Valencia. And they didn't bring up religion. They didn't avoid religion. If it had come up, they would have talked about it. I happen to know that Natalie Brunell is a Christian. I don't know about this Halston Valencia, this young woman she interviewed. But the young woman she interviewed, she said, I'm halfway through my college experience a few years ago. And I realized I'm excited about my business degree. I'm excited to go out and work in the world. but I also really want to be a wife and a mother and live in a home. And she went on to say on her own, do you know, before Bitcoin, I started to give up those dreams already. This is a this is
Wow.
a Gen Zer who felt like the nihilism of the financial world weighing in on her, such that if I can't afford a dwelling, then what's even the point of marriage? And I think for her, if I'm reading a little bit in between the lines here, if she were to enjoy being married, for her that equals also, Lord willing, being mother, right? So all these things go together for her. But if housing alone is out of reach, much less a new vehicle, much, getting beyond the struggles of finances just this moment, then she was ready to give up that whole dream, which we would say is given by God to her. That's not just one dream amongst many, but that's
Right.
built into us and shows up still most of the time, even in a fallen world. That you know, a young man desires to be married to a woman, a young woman desires to be married to a man. That then the idea of being mom and dad follows shortly thereafter, sometimes as short as 9 months thereafter, right? So, and she's talking about the financial world and realizing as a college student that it's so tough financially that that's probably not going to be me. Push that aside. And she described exactly what you were saying then as well, was hope. And if I could add one thing to it, and you indicated it, but I just want to name it for what it is. Suddenly I can think beyond just today.
The future.
You can think about the future.
Hmm.
Um, you can think about future. You start thinking about opportunity costs. A lot of people don't have any money, right? And yet we have seven subscription streaming services. Maybe two is enough. Maybe one's enough. Maybe one's too many. But I can begin thinking about foregoing some things in the present. Why? Because I can successfully save it now. And those savings can meaningfully grow for a future, whether I'm planning on my own or whether with my spouse, my wife, Megan and I, and with our kids, we dream about that. So suddenly our time horizon stretches out as well. And this is, I think this is a uniquely human thing as well. I'll say one more thing. You know, it's supposedly in our day and age virtuous to be a person who lives in the moment, right?
Hmm.
Who lives in the moment. I say, well, if
True.
that's virtue, then there's nobody more virtuous in the Ruffner house than Moki, our dog. Because let me tell you, she lives in the moment, right? She lives in the moment.
Or
She
my
doesn't
six
remember what
six
happened.
week old kid.
Yeah, Judah. Nobody more virtuous than Judah. Doesn't remember what happened yesterday. Has no plans for tomorrow. It's understandable with Judah. He is, he has a long ways to go physiologically, right? But in our house, there's nobody more virtuous than the dog, right? Now, I get it. There's people so stuck with concerns for tomorrow or regrets about yesterday. And by the way, the Christian faith speaks to both of these as well. That in Christ we are absolved for our past. In Christ, the things that have been done to us in our past, he can bring and does bring healing. And our future, we get to plan for it without idolizing it. And being freed from idolizing it, we can plan for it with somewhat of a loose hand, and then finally live in this moment and receive this moment as gift. But I would say to be fully human is then, and fully human in Christ is to actually see all three: the past, the present, and the future, right? And in a world where money is bad, when the world where money is bad, we are often reduced. It's not a virtuous thing in that world to be reduced in that way to just this moment. We are reduced to be dog-like creatures living so squarely in this moment right now that we can't even begin to dream about the future. So I understand, I think, what's meant by, hey, you should live in the moment more. But I do think fully alive people, and nobody's more fully alive than those of us who have our trust in Christ, which is offered to all people that we might all trust in Him. We get actually all three: past, present, and future. We get that, but I'm also sympathetic to the person in today's day and age who quote unquote lives in the moment, because when the money is as bad and terrible as it is, what else would they do, Jared? What else would they do?
Right. Well, what's in their front of their eyes is the concerns of today because
Right.
of the bad money, and so they can't get past this because it's there. And so you're totally right. We could say that the benefit it gives us is the freedom from the present to think about the future. And then I would even say to like take risk and to live life
Right.
in the best sense of the world as a child of God, in this received world, all of that stuff that we've talked a whole bunch about. I think you got to say, though, some of the like very good technological benefits of this too, right? So if we're merely thinking about, well, the technology itself, well, this is a public blockchain, right? That anyone can see who has how much, right? That it is not secret how much there will be in 10 years, right? So there is not a guy in the back room pulling the lever, right? So the benefit of that is it is a strict 21 million supply. There is only this many. The supply issuance, how much new of it comes on, is very clear and forthright, right? There's not that in the background. Another benefit that we've talked about too is that you can take custody, you can hold this yourself. You don't need to trust someone else to be able to do that. And we've talked about why maybe we should do that or shouldn't do that, or the pros and cons, all those sort of things. And then I think too, one of the benefits of this is that this is one of the last sense of there is true proof of work required to make it or to approve the stamps of it, right? So we talked all about electricity is required to mine Bitcoin, to be the one to produce the next block and mine it and mint it into the blockchain. That there's a real reality to Bitcoin, that it is not made up monkey world that we live in, but it is real energy. It is a real thing, even if it is in the digital world, that there are still real life resources, real life things that are needed to go into it, that need to be a part of it for it to function. So I feel like we've done this sort of not grounded, but somewhat grounded, like just more the affective part of what benefit does it give us, which I think is in some ways much more important. For people who are listening to this, I don't care about the facts. Tell me how it's going to make me feel, right? People are always attracted to story and attracted to emotion much more than they are to facts. But I feel like we have to say a little bit of facts too before we go on. So we've already started talking about this next question. How does it incline me to act? And David sort of said, you said it basically point blank, that it inclines you to think about the future, and in more than one way, not just in, should I buy this new iPad? Right. So I'm like super excited for the new iPad update because it's going to be a lot more like a Mac. And so I've been daydreaming about buying a 13-inch iPad because then I'll have a bigger real estate to do my screen stuff on. But I'm also like, if I'm about to spend, $600 on a tablet, like think of all the Bitcoin that you could buy. And then in 10 years, I could buy a bunch of tablets, It inclines you not just in that way, though, but also in the future sense of you're thinking beyond yourself. Right? You're not even just thinking about your wants and your desires. Suddenly it's about your family, and not even just your family, but maybe it's about your church and whatever nonprofit that you might like to support too. How could I then become a benefit to those and benefit their mission and vision too, once this has done what it's going to do or we think it should do, sort of thing, that it really pushes you forward in how you think and how you operate too in life. The thing that I would say, though, for how does it incline me, that you hear everybody talk about, is it will force you, if you're willing, to learn. It will force you to learn because it is a different thing, because it is different than the world that we live in. For whatever reason you get into it, we've talked about a rabbit hole before. You fall down, go down the rabbit hole. That Bitcoin will incline you to learn more, that it will take the blinders off, if you will. You want to use that language. And when you do that, you suddenly become aware of how many things you don't understand how they work. and even why they're important, how they work in a particular way or don't work in a particular way. And so Bitcoin will force you to learn more. And again, not even, it's like there's first order effects and second order effects, right? So we would say, oh, the first order effects, I got to learn how Bitcoin works. What is a wallet? How much can I buy? I talked to a guy my age or so at that conference I was talking about who said, well, whoever is going to have $120,000 to buy one of these things. I was like, well, you don't need 120,000. All you need is like a cent, really. You could probably buy a cent worth of Bitcoin somewhere. And he was like, oh, I didn't know that. And so even like the first order effects of how is it divisible? What is a wallet? What is cold storage? What is a halving? What is a miner? I mean, we've done a lot of this work here. So hopefully you've come along with us and you've learned a few of these things. But I think the second order effects are also some of the things we talked about today. So what is money? What makes good money? What makes bad money? What thing that I've learned the most about here is like, what is electricity, and what is a grid? What is, a sustainable load on the grid, and how does renewable energy function in that? And how does Bitcoin mining solve that? You do second order effects even too of like, how does a nation produce currency, right? So why is it $1, and who gets to control what, and how does that affect the way that I live? I mean, there are just so many things that it pushes and forces you to learn, if you're willing and want to, that it is a inclination and a driver. I don't want to call it betterment. That might be a little bit strong, but at least intellectual curiosity is what I think I'll summarize that for. It will push you to be intellectually curious. And in a world that is driven, and I use AI all the time, so don't hear this as like an AI doomer, but as a person in a world that is driven by, now we get those nice Google responses where you don't have to really do any research on your own, or you can go to an AI chatbot and it'll give you your answer. This is going to push you to go deeper than that, right? Not just simple, what everybody commonly agrees upon, but to ask the deeper questions. Is that really the way it is? Or why is it that way? Or is that the best way that it is? And Bitcoin will do that to you because of how different it is, and because of how outside of the sort of normal system, the normal world that we function in. So push you to intellectual curiosity is what I would say.
I love that. I love that. I would say it's pushed me as a father to, I was always comfortable talking the faith with my kids, but it's pushed me to talk about the world with them in a way that it goes back to that language of hope. I'm able to say there's a lot of complex things happening in American life. There's parties. I mean, I still remember when I said something critical about a particular president, and one of the kids said, "What? But didn't we vote for him?" We, as if they had. Um,
Didn't we vote for him? Yes, our household elected him, actually.
well, yeah. The astonishment there was that somebody we could vote for could do something poor, regrettable, right?
Right.
Even bad. And I got it's that was one where you're just sort of like, hey, you need to lower the bar for everybody, kid, because we're all fallen. But back to this, we're actually able, I would say, around the dinner table. In part, it's age and stage of life sort of stuff. My kids are older. I think we would naturally be going into these things, but I get to. A lot of topics have a connection, and oftentimes a deep connection to the money. And again, I get to say with them, oh, yeah, what a mess that subject matter is. What a mess we are. And you mentioned first order and second order, and we literally, I guess to some degree, rehearse some first order hope and some second order hope. The first order hope in, thanks be to God in Christ Jesus our Lord, for he has done this for us, but a second order hope, and it's a there's a big gap between that first order and second, but kids, this is also why I'm very hopeful about Bitcoin. you know, the ability to take away some of the incentives of war, right? Bitcoin would take away the ability to just overspend and overspend, and then to compensate the overspending with the printing of new dollars, which is the fiat game run by governments who have fiat money, which solves their governmental fiscal problems, but puts the actual people the government is supposed to be there to serve in more and more of a vice every given day and month when that happens. So we get to talk about that, how they've painted themselves into a corner. How fun is this, kids? This is what one person said. The only way this will ever be fixed is if, by some sly roundabout way, some other currency that can't be abused in that way would come about. And that's what we think we're seeing in Bitcoin. I like something else you said earlier. I just I even look at Bitcoin differently now than when I first started. When I first invested in it, it was this, a few dollars into this, and a few dollars into a handful, a dozen other things. I was, it was like maybe being in Vegas where you live, and headed to some gaming table and putting chips down on a variety of numbers. I'm just going to spread out the chips and hope that one hits. I don't really
Right.
see our dollar cost averaging, a little bit from every paycheck in that light anymore. I see it as exchanging weak dollars for better dollars, or back to my opening analogy, exchanging smog air for clear mountain air, right? It's a happy exchange for me. It's a super happy exchange for me. So I see it like that. And in doing it, and then kind of also participating in the one system and sort of voting out of the other system, I'm slowly, along with many others, giving further life still to this new system and taking some of the air out of the other one. The other one didn't need my help. It was hurting itself and those around it all on its own. But I can opt out of it now meaningfully. So it's inclined me to do that, to be able to talk about the ills of the world, see a common thread through it, but also see this instrument, this tool that now has been afforded by whoever Satoshi Nakamoto was, and say, wow, this is a helpful tool for humanity. And kids, if it keeps gaining in network effect, it will take some of the poison out of the other currencies. It'll take the sting of that poison out of them over time. And that's thrilling for me as a father. It's thrilling for me as a neighbor and a husband, as a friend. So that's maybe where I would stop for myself, unless you have more, Jared.
No, I think that's great. So the phrase I want to come back to, I think, is where Trevor sort of ended in last episode, was that we believe in a God who redeems technology for his purposes in the world. And the example he used was the cross, right? So this brutal, gruesome thing, God redeems it and makes it this image that we have on our walls behind us, that we wear around our necks, and is a symbol of hope. And in some ways, I would say to you, Bitcoin redeems money. That maybe even in a way, Bitcoin takes money and it doesn't remove all the sinful parts of human nature, right? I mean, we're still going to be broken people with the money that we have, but maybe it forces us to live within the constraints of the Bitcoin world, the Bitcoin software, if we want to use that phrase. And in some ways, it actually helps us as people deal with money in a better way, that maybe we're not as necessarily as greedy, because we can't. It's not even possible to make more of it, right? And in fact, it actually grows our purchasing power. So we don't need to be greedy, because our money is better. And it's not about necessarily getting more as much as it is just keeping it and you spend it when you want to, and you're not concerned about that because there's just enough. And so I would say, Trevor, if you're listening, I'm curious what your thoughts are. Do we make a case for you for the case of Bitcoin as technology that is redeemable and as it redeems money, but maybe to what are some of the holes that we remain to be filled or remain to fill for you, but also for you, listener, too. So let us know. Is this compelling? If you're on the fence, does this help you evaluate what Bitcoin is? Does it give you more questions than answers? Hopefully, in some ways it does, to help you dive down that hole and learn more. But hopefully it also helps you give a footing on what it is and why we think it is so valuable, not in the sense of dollars, but invaluable in the sense of importance for you, for your family, for your future, and like we said, for your hope too. So thanks for being here. Make sure you like, subscribe as well. It helps other people see this too. And we'd love to hear what you think, all those sort of things. So we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for being here.